Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Chagigah, pages 4 through 10, Daf Dalad through Daf Yud. 4. Amar, Kol Zechorcha l'rabot et hakatanim. The statement in the Torah of Kol Zechorcha, all of your menfolk, come to include minors, below bar mitzvah. V'hatanan, but the Gemara says that we learned in a Mishnah, Chutz mechereshot katan, that among those categories of people exempted from pilgrimage festival obligation includes the minor, the katan. Amar Rabbi, so Rabbi responds, Lo kasha, there's no contradiction here. We can resolve the contradiction. Kama katan shigil chinuch, kama katan shlo yigil chinuch, that the statement which says that a katan is required to go to the pilgrimage refers to one who is of the age of chinuch, of training in mitzvot. And the statement which says he's exempt is for the child below the age of chinuch. So the Gemara then says, Katan shigila chinuch midrabanan, but even if you want to tell me that it's referring to a child who's of the age of training, and he's only rabbinically required, so how could you cite a Torah verse to prove a rabbinic rule? To which the Gemara responds, you're right, Einachinami, it's true, you're right. Across Machtabi Alma, that the verse cited is only a mere scriptural allusion, but not a true derivation, because in fact it's only a rabbinic requirement, not a Torah law. Date. The Torah says on an unpleasant verse that God will be angry on that day and abandon us and turn his face from us. Anyone who has never experienced hester panim, that God turning his face away from us, is not from among us, meaning is not a true Jew. Of course, this is not a literal statement in the sense that a person who hasn't experienced a bad day is not actually a Jew. It just means that the badge of the Jew is sufferance, is having experienced unpleasant times, where it seems as though God has forsaken us. Anyone who's not been the subject of hayal echol, being devoured by the adversary, by the Gentile, is not from among us, is not a true Jew. Again, the same sort of idea, that a real Jew has experienced bad days on account of having been a Jew, and has been subject to persecution. Daf Vav. Tanya. Olat Tamid Asiyah Bahar Sinai. So the Torah says that the Tamid, the daily perpetual sacrifice, was made at Mount Sinai. But there's actually a machlokot as to whether that's literally true. Rabbi Elazar Omer Masa Nemru B'Sinai V'Hiyatzma Lo Karva, that the law, the details of the law of the Tamid, of the daily sacrifice, were taught to Moshe and Bnei Yisrael at Har Sinai, but the sacrifice itself was not brought until a later time, until Eretz Yisrael. Whereas Rabbi Akiva Omer Karva V'Shuv Lo Paska, Rabbi Akiva says, no, it was brought and it never stopped. Rabbi Akiva, throughout in several places in the Talmud, shows his devotion, his commitment to this notion of Tmidiyut, of perpetual Judaism, that the Tamid was brought in the olden days in the wilderness, and it was brought every day after that. And the message is we have to be consistent in our Judaism, and not give up even one day of our commitment to it. Daf Zayin. Olot Nedarim Nedavot, Bot B'Moed. One is allowed to bring discretionary sacrifices, volitional sacrifices, where you made a promise to bring a neder or a nedava. You're allowed to bring those offerings on Chol HaMoed. However, on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to. Why not? Because on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do malacha, and one of the malachot is slaughtering an animal. So we're only allowed to do malacha on Yom Tov if it's for ochel nefesh purposes, for the sake of food. And when it comes to korbanot, for those korbanot which have to be brought that day, specific to that day, but your neder and nedava could have been brought at any time, a week before, a week after. Okay, Olat Re'iyah afilu b'Yom Tov, and as for the Olat Re'iyah, the burnt offering of the pilgrimage, it's brought even on Yom Tov. And when it is brought, you can only bring it from non-consecrated animals, meaning you cannot satisfy your obligation to bring an Olat Re'iyah from something which was already holy for some other purpose, because that's double dipping. It's essentially cheating the system and saving money from your own pocket out of your religious obligations. Daf Chet. Chagigat Arba'asar Lav Deoraita. So one idea is that there's a Chagigah offering brought on Erev Pesach, on the 14th of Nisan. It's different from the Chagigah offerings of Ol Shlosh Regalim, in the sense that it's brought before the holiday, not during the holiday. And it's only brought when you think that you're going to need food on the night of the Seder, sacrificial meat, and that the Pesach sacrifice is going to be insufficient for your group. So lav doraita means it's not an absolute. It's not a Torah law in the sense that it must be done. Rather, there are circumstances when it ought to be done, but those are not every circumstance. Also in this daf, mi sheyesh la'ochlim merubin nechasav mu'atin mevi shlamim merubim v'lot mu'atot. A person who has many eaters in his family, but not many possessions, meaning he's not a rich guy. So what should he do? What should he favor? More olot, more burnt offerings, or more shlamim, more peace offerings? The answer is, since you have a lot of eaters, you need more peace offerings, more shlamim. And because you don't have a lot of money at your disposal, fewer olot. Okay, daf tet. So there are certain things which cannot be rectified. What's an example of something that cannot be rectified? If you missed Shema one morning or one evening, or you missed Tfilah Shachrit or Tfilah Shel Arvit, or you missed the davening, the prayer services morning or evening. And what is an example of something that is missing, a lacking, that will not be counted? It's where his buddies, your friends, your colleagues, your associates, your comrades got together for the sake of some mitzvah performance, and everybody was gathered together and registered for that purpose, and you absented yourself. So all the other guys in the crowd were there and they did the mitzvah, but you did not show up. That's an example of chesron lo yuchal limanot. Daf Yud, page 10. Heter nedarim porchim ba'avir, ve'lam mashi yismochu. The release from vows, the hatarat nedarim, which is a basic part of our Judaism nowadays, has really no basis in the Torah. The Gemara says, "Parachim ba'avir," it's floating in the air, but without much to hang on to. Ein la mashi yismochu. You can't rely upon any scriptural verse to prove that this is accurate. Hilchot Shabbat Chagod Meilot, the laws of the Sabbath and laws of Chagigah, Hareim Karim to Masara. These are examples of mountains suspended by a hair, in the sense that there are many laws, but only limited number of verses, maybe one verse in thousands of laws. So there's at least something in the Bible, but not much, and there's many, many halachot. But there are other categories of the law, like financial law, or the temple service, or tumah v'tahara, purity and impurity, or the arayot, the forbidden unions, where there are many verses in Torah that talk about it. So there you have mashi yismochu, what to rely upon. And these are all gufei Torah, critical components of the body of Torah. Everyone have a great week.